Now, I just got done watching Unsafe Space, which is basically the best YouTube channel ever, for my opinion, and they talked about this article that I think is so important and so necessary that more people know about it. So we're going to talk about this. Red and Blue America agree that now is the time to violate the Constitution. People of both parties seem rather okay with undermining core civil liberties in order to fight the pandemic. I'm sorry, what? What? People from both parties? Both parties. You heard me right. Both Republicans and Democrats are okay with violating the Constitution if it gives us that beautiful feeling of a little temporary safety. And you all know how I feel about that concept. You all know how Ben Franklin felt about that concept as well. So we're going to talk about this article. We're going to read it. Listen, if you have not found Unsafe Space yet, this YouTube channel is amazing. They were absolutely a part of my process of waking up. They have wonderful content. I will link them up in the description below so you can go and subscribe to them and check it out. But before we dig into this, speaking of infringing on liberties, I'll tell you guys what, man, YouTube doesn't like me all that much. They're definitely doing stuff to my channel. I am absolutely positive of it. So I just want to take this opportunity to say, if you like my content, please hit that subscribe button. Please hit the notifications. If you are having any trouble with the notifications coming on and you want them, please let me know, because I've been hearing in the comments from more than a few people that they're having trouble turning on the notifications. Now, if you think you are subscribed to my channel, but maybe you haven't looked in a little bit just to make sure, now is a perfect time to double check, because YouTube has been messing with me in the last week. The struggle is real, y'all. This is the world that we live in. So with that out of the way, let's take a look at this article. Countries are taking extraordinary measures to slow the COVID-19 pandemic. Many of these measures limit individual freedom and may violate rights guaranteed by national constitutions. Italy's complete breakdown, enforced by criminal penalties, probably violates its constitution. Norwegian lawmakers have proposed an emergency law that temporarily gives the government unprecedented power to override the constitution and national laws to thwart the virus. Meanwhile, without consulting the Israeli parliament, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu enacted emergency regulations allowing for stunning surveillance power to combat the virus. Never one to waste a good crisis, Hungary's Viktor Orban will likely be able to rule by decree for the foreseeable future. That all sounds fun, well and good, doesn't it? But the United States now faces this similar dilemma. To what extent should the Constitution be violated to fight the coronavirus? Lockdowns, especially ones that apply to people who haven't tested positive for the virus, are constitutionally questionable. The threat by leaders of Newark, New Jersey to prosecute residents who spread false information about the virus, if carried out, could violate the First Amendment. Some people in California have challenged the city of San Jose's authority to force a gun shop to close, citing the right to arm themselves. Perhaps most alarming, the U.S. Department of Justice has quietly asked Congress for the ability to ask chief judges to detain people indefinitely without trial during emergencies. I'm just going to say that one again. They have quietly asked Congress for the ability to ask chief justices to detain people indefinitely without trial during emergencies. Weren't we letting people out of prison? Last I checked, we're letting real criminals who have really been convicted of crimes out of prison, but we want the ability to indefinitely hold people without trial. I'm sorry, what? I did a live stream with Mikey Harlow yesterday, and if you didn't get a chance to see it, go watch it on this channel. Mike Harlow is awesome. Everyone should know who he is. He's so smart, so sharp, and it was a great chat. And we talked about a movie that we both have in common, which is a movie that came out probably like 20 years ago. Now, maybe even a little bit more than that, called The Contender. It was about a woman a Republican actually, I believe. No, she was a Republican first, and then she became a Democrat, but she was being elevated up to the position of vice president, and about her confirmation trial. And there's a line in that movie that I've thought of all the time since I very first saw it back when I was in college, that says this: Principles only mean something if you stand by them when they are inconvenient. Principles only mean something when you stand by them when they are inconvenient. I really think that's an important line to think about. I think that's an important line for us to just ponder. Do we stand by our principles when they are just convenient to us, or do we also stand by them when they are inconvenient to us? Because if you don't stand by them when they are inconvenient, can you really say you're a principled person? I don't know. I don't think so. To assess how Americans weigh the trade-off between preserving civil liberties and halting the spread of the coronavirus, we conducted a survey last week. Now, the timing of this article was March 25th, so this is a couple weeks ago. So what they're really talking about is mid-March, so about a little less than a month ago as of this recording. Just as state and local governments were beginning to implement their most restrictive policies yet, the survey reveals a remarkable willingness to tolerate civil rights violations in order to confront the pandemic, regardless of party affiliation. Regardless of party affiliation. So don't be just blaming this on the libs, folks. Don't be saying, oh, it's just the Democrats. The Democrats are doing this to us. No. Regardless of party affiliation. We presented a nationally representative sample of 3,000 U.S. residents with 8 possible policy responses to the outbreak, all of which may be unconstitutional, including forced quarantine in a government facility, criminal penalties for spreading misinformation, bans against certain people entering the country, and conscription of healthcare workers. We also asked our sample to imagine that public health officials had reviewed the policies and estimated that each would likely save the same number of lives, hypothetical figures that each would likely save some number of lives, not the same, some number of lives, hypothetical figures that we provided. A majority of respondents supported all 8 of these policies, most by considerable margins. The proposals with the lowest support were seizing businesses and banning all citizens and non-citizens outside the country from entering, but these policies still had 58% and 63% support respectively. I'm just going to break that down and say that again. Seizing businesses had support of 58% of respondents, regardless of party affiliation. Banning citizens and non-citizens outside the country from entering had 63% support, regardless of party affiliation. The proposals with the highest levels of support were banning non-citizens from entering the country, 85%. I kind of understand that one a little bit more, honestly. And conscripting healthcare professionals to work despite risks to their own health. So essentially, drafting healthcare professionals was supported by 78% of respondents, regardless of party affiliation. Both policies burdened a defined minority of the population, so it's not surprising that large majorities support them. And this is the problem, folks, because you think that if something doesn't impact me, well, it's no big deal. Listen, I did a video earlier about Michigan banning people from traveling to their own private property. They're literally banning people. If you own a second home in Michigan, you're not going to be able to travel to it after today. They're banning people from going to their own property. And there was one person that was quoted in the article said, oh, I think that's fine. But I'm really mad that I can't get my gardening stuff, because they're also banning all sales of anything that's not essential. And they're saying that gardening stuff to, plant in your own garden, socially distanced from anyone, that's not essential. They're not allowing people to do that either. So this woman in this article was annoyed that she couldn't buy her gardening stuff, but was completely okay with someone not being able to travel to their own private property. You have to look bigger picture here, folks. Just because something doesn't impact you doesn't mean it won't impact you. And you've got to start speaking up for other people. But speaking of speaking up, let's think about what people are okay with doing to free speech. But criminalizing speech based on its content, an idea antithetical to modern American constitutionalism, was also very popular, regardless of party affiliation. About 70% of respondents supported restricting people's ability to say things that may qualify as misinformation. Who's deciding what qualifies as misinformation? Because if it's CNN, I'm going to be honest, I don't want them to be the arbiters of what qualifies as misinformation, because they're spreading a lot of misinformation themselves. Likely, 77% of respondents support suspending all religious services and gatherings, thereby restricting religious freedom. And even when we explicitly told half our sample that the policies may violate the Constitution, the majority supported all 8 of them. Even the speech restrictions. Even when they were explicitly told that this may violate the Constitution. What in the hell has happened to us? Do people really not understand what the Constitution is? I just don't get it, and I don't think that this is a liberal conservative thing either, because frankly, The West Wing is one of my favorite shows of all time. I love The West Wing. I haven't watched it in a minute, but I have pretty regular marathons of it, and it's just such a good show, man. It's really, really good. And they talk about freedom and liberty and the Constitution all the time, and that was a very, very, very liberal show. Very liberal show, and they talked about this stuff all the time. So what in the holy hell has happened to us? I just don't get it. Perhaps the most striking feature of our results is the broad bipartisan endorsement of liberty-restricting policies. Like other surveys, ours reflected a huge gap between Democrats and Republicans in approval of President Donald Trump's handling of the pandemic. 34% of Democrats expressed approval, while 88% of Republicans did. No surprise there. One might have reasonably concluded that policy preferences were dividing their responses. The Democrats want aggressive government intervention, which they feel the president has failed to deliver, while Republicans, encouraged by Trump's early dismissal of the outbreak, prefer a wait-and-see or laissez-faire approach. And listen, I would have said this too, because all I've seen for days, because you're stuck at home, work is a little weird, you spend a lot of time on social media. I spend probably more time than I should on social media, and all you see is people saying, oh, the Democrats want authoritarianism, the Democrats want authoritarianism, the Democrats want authoritarianism. Hold on to your seat, folks. Let's see what's actually going on. But our findings suggest that's not the case. Democrats and Republicans alike are willing to sacrifice civil liberties to fight the virus. Republicans, you've got some housekeeping to do, man. You've got some spring cleaning to do amongst your own population. And do not use the excuse that I've heard over and over and over again, which is, Caroline, there's secret leftists that are infiltrating our mix and pretending to be Republicans. No. Stop it. This is your house too, man. It's happening there just as much as it's happening on the Democrats. The two groups showed almost identical levels of support for detaining sick people in government facilities, conscripting people to work, prohibiting the spread of misinformation, and banning all people, citizens and non-citizens alike, from entering the country. 74% of Democrats supported each of the 8 policy proposals, while 71% of Republicans did. 74% of Democrats versus 71% of Republicans. Congratulations. In the area of infringing on our civil liberties, both parties look exactly alike. There is a 3% difference between the two. The small disparity contrasts with several recent survey findings showing that Americans with different political affiliations are responding to the crisis very differently. So admittedly, we do have to offer this. This survey could be an anomaly. Maybe it is. Who knows? But I wouldn't, don't be so quick to dismiss it, man. I would be cautious about that if I was you. I really would be. An example, The Atlantic reported on Friday that blue states are responding more aggressively to the outbreak than red states, and the NBC News Wall Street Journal poll conducted last week found that Democrats were 28 percentage points more likely to be concerned about someone in their family getting the COVID-19. It's like the Ohio State University, right? Concerned about someone in their family getting COVID-19 than Republicans. Even so, both sides are convinced that aggressive measures are needed to save lives. Often efforts to roll back civil liberties face political opposition, but now bipartisan support for rights-restricting COVID-19 responses could smooth the path for constitutional erosion. James Madison predicted as much when he described constitutional rights as parchment barriers, easily transgressed when the majority is so inclined. Listen, one of the reasons I love Unsafe Space so much is they do a regular book club, right? So a couple months ago, we read Fahrenheit 451. If you go to their channel, you can actually watch the discussion that we had about it. Fascinating discussion. I hadn't read Fahrenheit 451 since high school, and I didn't really like it in high school, but it took on a whole new meaning for me now, and I strongly recommend you go and give it another read if you haven't read it in a while. Because one of the things that's so interesting about that book is it was the people that imposed authoritarianism. It was the people that imposed it on themselves. It was not the government. It was the people that wanted authoritarianism. And we've seen that. We've seen that over and over and over again in this crisis. People speaking up, demanding Trump be more an authoritarian. Like, what? You've been screeching for 2 years about how Trump's a dictator. Now all of a sudden you want him to be an actual dictator? I don't want Trump to be a dictator. I don't want any president to be a dictator. It goes against the entire purpose of the thing. What are we doing? And indeed, history presents numerous examples of liberty violations made in the face of security threats. The Alien and Sedition Acts were signed into law by President John Adams, Japanese-American internment camps during World War II, and the use of torture after 9/11. After the threat has subsided, Americans must recognize any constitutional violations for what they were, lest they become the new normal. And that's really what I'm terrified of in this whole thing, is I believe that there's so much overreach happening. And witnessing people being so quick to give in to having their lives controlled by other people. I mean, what is wrong with us? I just don't understand. Listen, now's the time when we need to be speaking up about this. I swear, I am focusing so much of my content on this right now simply because I really think it's like the most important thing. I can talk about the workplace all day long. I can rant about politics all day long. But I really, this is important to me. Like, this type of thing in terms of the crazy nonsense that's going on, the crazy laws that are being enacted, arresting people for being by themselves in the middle of the ocean, publicly shaming businesses for operating out of their homes, saying that you can't go to your own private property. This is nuts, folks. If you think that this is crazy, you need to be speaking up, because I said this in the video I made this morning. I'm going to say it again just in case you didn't watch it. The people who have power in any situation are those that are talking. They're those that are expressing. If you do not express opposition to this, you can think it in your head all you want. You can rant in your house to your husband, wife, spouse, whatever, all you want. But if you are not expressing opposition to your liberties being taken away, do not be surprised when they are.